Hello and welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey. My name is Art, and today we are starting the Ray Bradbury Short Story Club. Well, technically we're restarting it, but we're off and running now. Again, what I'm going to be doing is going through his very first collection of short stories entitled Dark Carnival, and I think most of them I have read in other collections. There might be a couple that I haven't gotten to yet, so that'll be exciting to find those. As I mentioned in a previous video, most of you, if not all of you, probably don't have a copy of this book because it was his first collection of stories published. I believe there are only something like 2,000 copies made. And after that, it wasn't ever re-released. They did kind of revamp it, redesign it, and add new stories, take old ones out, and called it The October Country, which is a great collection of short stories. But it's different. It's not the same collection as his first one. And as I thought about what I wanted to do with this, I kept thinking of different collections or just going through different of my favorite stories. But then I thought, why not just start at the beginning with how the average reader would have encountered Ray Bradbury. And so that brings us to Dark Carnival, and the very first story in Dark Carnival is called Homecoming, an absolute classic and is on many people's top 10 lists of the best Ray Bradbury short stories. So we'll get into that story in a minute. Now, if you don't know who Ray Bradbury is, well, I'm so glad you've decided to watch this video anyway, because he is one of my all-time favorite writers. He was born in 1920 and died in the year 2012. He had a long and full life of writing hundreds of short stories and a couple of novels, classics such as Fahrenheit 451 that probably a lot of you have either read or heard, or hopefully at least have seen a movie adaptation of some kind. To kind of take a quick side trail here, I will be doing a Fahrenheit 451 read-along beginning in June. I believe it's the week of June 11th. I'll be using the 60th anniversary edition of that story for a very specific reason. It has many, not just the text itself, but it has essays and articles about the book and its impact that I also want to go through as we read that story together. So I would love for you to come along with us on that journey of exploring Fahrenheit 451. But back to Ray Bradbury. He's an American author and is known for writing science fiction, fantasy, mystery, literature, fiction, poetry. He just wrote it all. And in fact, he kind of pushed back against that label of being a science fiction writer. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think he said he preferred the term like science fantasy, which if you've read his books, especially like The Martian Chronicles, you can kind of see his point there. Now, I've heard that Dark Carnival is getting a possible reprint in a more affordable reprint coming up here this fall. But if it's only about $10, that's going to be a whole lot cheaper than getting, the original first edition, which is, I think on eBay I saw recently, it was around $3,000 to $4,000. So slightly more affordable, and I won't have to explain to my family why I spent $4,000 on a book, on just one book. Now, they could probably understand if it was, a whole library, but just one book, I might have some trouble with that. So a little bit of background to the collection as a whole. In 1946, Bradbury met with Don Congdon, a literary agent who became instrumental in his career. And Congdon believed that Bradbury was very talented and helped submit the collection to different publishers. Well, several of them turned it down because they were unsure how to categorize it. Because as we'll find out, Bradbury wrote all over the place. Again, fantasy, science fiction, horror, gothic, he just went wherever his imagination took him. But finally, in 1947, a small publisher named Arkham House was known for publishing both works of horror and weird fiction, and they expressed an interest in his collection. However, because they were a small publisher and because there was a little bit of a risk publishing such a new author with such a wide variety of writing styles, that they limited the production, like I said, to about 2,000 or 3,000 copies. But it was a critical success, and the book helped establish Bradbury as a talented writer. of speculative fiction. But to get to our story today, and I read it in this collection called, I can't really see it because of the glare, but it's called The Stories of Ray Bradbury. It's the Everyman's Library edition. It has, I think, 100 stories in it of some of his classic works. So I'd highly recommend this collection. Homecoming is, I believe, the second story in this. It's also in October Country, I believe. And then another collection I have that you might be interested in owning is Bradbury Stories. There's not a whole lot of overlap between these two massive volumes. In fact, I think there's no overlap at all. So if you really want to get a taste of what Bradbury is like, just grab one of these omnibus collections. You definitely can't go wrong with that. Homecoming was first published in a special issue of Mademoiselle in October of 1946. Which, if you're wondering, that's a strange magazine for a writer like Bradbury to be in. You'd be right. He was looking for different magazines to print it, but a lot of them, again, weren't quite sure how to categorize it. So he sent it off to this literary magazine, and they actually expressed great interest in it, even though they typically would only publish literary fiction. And so what they decided to do was to design a whole special October issue with Homecoming being the centerpiece, the masterpiece of the collection. And they got a young artist named Charles Addams to do the illustration. Now, of course, we all know that name. He's the creator of the Addams Family. Between the artist and the writer, it was such a perfect blend of creativity that I wish they would have had time to collaborate on more works in their future. But if I'm remembering the biographies right, I don't think they ever were able to get back together to work on something. So that is very unfortunate. So the story itself, what is it about? It's about a young boy named Timothy Eliot and his weird and strange family. It's very much of a Gothic style. And we find out that Timothy, keeping with the Addams Family term, if anyone has watched the Wednesday Netflix series, great show, watch it. But there we have, instead of muggles, they use the term normies, people who are quote unquote normal. So here we find that Timothy would be classified as a normie, as somebody who is normal. And he lives in a family of vampires and spooks and weirdos, just the things that go bump in the night, they're part of the Eliot family. The story is about their homecoming, that on All Hallows Eve, the family comes from all over to gather together to celebrate. So you really see a lot of overlap between, the Addams family and the Eliot family, but it's not just a ripoff. I mean, in fact, the Addams Family was a newspaper cartoon strip that started in 1938, and I believe Bradbury was a fan of that strip. I mean, it hits right what he's right in his wheelhouse of what he likes to write about and talk about. So I think there's probably some influence in that, but it's definitely Bradbury has a very original approach to it. Anyway, through this family gathering, Timothy feels very much like an outsider due to him being, again, quote unquote, normal. So the family members gather together. There's talks and hushed talk about how Timothy isn't showing signs of being like a vampire or, doing anything spooky or talented or anything like that. And Timothy is feeling very much like an outsider. His sister, Cecily, even for a short time, takes possession of him. That's an ability that Ceci has. And there's actually a couple other stories in the Eliot family stories that Ceci appears, and you can find out more about her. So this is like one of Bradbury's ongoing stories that are eventually collected together in a book called From the Dust Returned, which is a marvelous, marvelous collection of all these Eliot family stories kind of stitched together to tell a story, a novel, much as he did with the Martian Chronicles. And then his Uncle Enar, who's he gives me some of the vibes of the grandpa from the Munsters. But Uncle Enar tries to cheer him up, tries to help him. And by the way, there will be spoilers for this story, so if you haven't read it, go ahead and go and read it, and then come back so you can watch the video. But one way that Uncle Enar tries to cheer him up, Timothy is sitting down. He's feeling sick because, like I said, his sister Ceci tried to possess him and help him to see that he's normal, but or to show that he could do the things like fly and drink blood and all that. But all it did was end up making him sick, and almost ended tragically, which she thought was funny, but he got really angry. Anyway, he runs off to cry, and Uncle Enar comes, and I want to read you this paragraph because I think it's really beautifully written. Timothy. Uncle Enar's wings spread and twitched and came in with a sound like kettle drums. Timothy felt himself plucked up like a thimble and set upon Enar's shoulder. Don't feel badly, nephew Timothy. Each to his own, each in his own way. How much better things are for you, how rich. The world's dead for us. We've seen so much of it, believe me. Life's best to those who live the least of it. It's worth more per ounce, Timothy. Remember that. This whole description is just so beautiful. Even just describing the way his wings spread and twitched and came and the sound that they make, it's just, oh, it's so good. I want to think about a minute about what Enar says there when he tells them, each to his own, each in his own way. And how true is that? We each have our own path we take. We each have our own journey that we take. On my podcast, I interview authors, and the thing that the authors all have in common is that they're published. But the thing that's different is the journey they take to publication. Some go through great trials, some go through heartache, some go through years of trying to be published before they are, and others find success and luck right away. It's all different, and each personality is different, and they bring a different viewpoint and different passion to the stories they write. I think this is so true about all of us, even in life, is that, we each take our own way, and that's okay. We don't have to be like everyone else. In fact, it's good not to be just like everyone else. So celebrate that diversity. And then he tells Timothy how rich your life is. He says, for us, life is dead. The world's dead. But you're alive. You won't live forever like the Elliot family will. And Uncle Enar says that makes life so much more precious to you because it's temporary. It's going to have more value and greater value to Timothy. This is a really interesting thought. But then he says this. I really like this quote. He says, life's best to those who live the least of it. And I wonder what you think about that. And I wonder how Bradbury would change that phrase later in his life. Because I'm trying to think if I would say that's true or not. And I understand what Bradbury is saying because, to children, life is the best because they've only lived a short time. They have no pressures, no responsibilities. Like my kids are teenagers. They have a job, and they have no bills to pay. It's just money free and clear. And I'm kind of jealous of that. And they're in just such a joyous time of life because as you get older, you get more care, more worn, more concerns and pressures and all that. But as I'm getting older and I'm turning 45 in just a month or two, I'm finding that living a lot of life now has had some great value too. I've been able to see my children growing up and starting to get out on their own now. And it's such a wonderful thing to see that it's very precious to me. So an interesting thought there from Uncle Enar, and beautifully written by Ray Bradbury. The family decides that they are going to, once the party breaks up, they're going to meet again in Salem, 1970. And, from the time the story was written, that was like 25 years into the future. And Timothy begins to realize everyone will still be here, but I might not be. He was 14 in the story. he'd be in his 30s by the time the family all got back together again. So he's grieved over that, and he thinks, well, who's to say I'm even going to be here? I might be dead by then, which then gets him thinking about mortality. And his mother brings him comfort, which I think this is very beautifully said. I know Bradbury can be criticized at times for the way he portrays women in his stories, and some of that is being a product of his time. But here I think we see something very, very beautifully written. His mother comes to him and says, "Son," she said, "we love you. Remember that. We all love you. No matter how different you are, no matter if you leave us one day." She kissed his cheek. "And if and when you die, your bones will lie undisturbed. We'll see to that. You'll lie at ease forever, and I'll come visit every All Hallows Eve and tuck you in the more secure." The house was silent. Far away, the wind went over a hill with its last cargo of dark bats echoing, chittering. Timothy walked up the steps, one by one, crying to himself all the way. And it's kind of a sad way to end the story, but I think a very moving one. As I just love what his mother says here, is that, we love you no matter how different you are. We love you. And, if and when the time comes when you die, they're going to honor him. They're going to respect him. They're going to take care of him still. And I don't know, it's just this picture of the mother coming to the grave, to make sure he's secure and doing well, even in his grave. I just think that's such a tender moment in the story. And it just almost brings me to tears when I read that, because it's just really sweet. Overall, I think what the story does is it deals with death and with feeling different. I think something that we all kind of feel, that we're trying to find our place, and everyone else just seems so different than who we are. That's something I've really been experiencing, especially over the last couple of years, for various reasons, and trying to find my place. So yeah, even at 45, we can experience those feelings. That's part of why I love booktube so much, is because I'm finding the people, who are like me, that when I want to talk about Bradbury or gush about Dickens, I know I've got a group of people who are excited about that and can get on board and say, yeah, absolutely, this is a shared passion. And that's really, really great. I think Bradbury in the story, like I mentioned, also takes a very frank look at death, that, our life is not eternal, at least not on this earth. I don't want to, I have thoughts about the afterlife, and that's not really the point of this channel, but as a Christian, we have hope of an afterlife, but this life on earth, it's not, we're not designed to live forever. And it's possible that, as Uncle Enar says, that if we did, everything would just feel dead. The fact that our lives here are temporary, that makes each second of our lives precious and fragile and meaningful, because there will never be another second that was like the one we just experienced. So I don't mean to, pressure you to make sure you live life to the fullest, but I want to encourage you, to live life to the fullest. Is there something that you wanted to do that you haven't done yet, and you think, I'd like to do this someday before I die? Well, make today that day and do it. As Bradbury said, jump off the cliff, build your wings on the way down. Just do it. So whatever that is, take a jump and do it, because this might be the opportunity you have to do it. All right, that's Homecoming. For the month of June, our short story will be Skeleton, and I'll have a video out around June 30th. And then the next couple of stories we'll cover is The Jar, The Lake, and The Maiden. Now, I don't actually remember what The Maiden is about, so it's possible I haven't read that story yet. But the others, The Skeleton, The Jar, The Lake, those are some of my favorite Bradbury stories. And again, I'm taking only one a month. Now, I might change that and do it more frequently as we get into fall. I'm not sure yet. I just know I have a very, very busy summer ahead, so I don't want to overcommit myself, which I notoriously have trouble doing. So we'll just keep it at one story a month for right now. And also, for more Bradbury content, come back in June. I'll be doing a slow deep dive read along of Fahrenheit 451 starting the week of June 11th. I'll have probably have another video or so introducing that coming up, but be on the lookout for that. And so until next time, I hope you remember to like and subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming bookish content. And so until next time, as Ray Bradbury would say, live forever. Take care.